All right, hi everybody. Welcome to today's event on cloud trends and attitudes toward digital transformation for Dynamics AX. We'll be looking at new data from AX customers and professionals today, and I'm really looking forward to diving into that with everybody. I'm Jason Gumpert from MSDynamicsWorld.com. I'm hosting today's event, and like I said, we'll have some brand new findings from a recent poll and some good conversation with a panel about those results and some of the broader implications for businesses that use Dynamics AX or that serve companies that use Dynamics AX. And look forward to hearing from our panelists about their views as well on how they provide cloud services to the Dynamics AX community. So before I go too much further, I just want to let everyone know who our panelists are. It's Tyler Doerner from WatServ. He's a Vice President of Sales, and Scott Morley, a Principal Architect at OneNeck IT. We'll be hearing quite a bit more from them and their views on some of the trends we're seeing and a little more about themselves as well. And before I give the floor over to them to introduce themselves, I just want to do a bit of housekeeping and talking about the overall agenda we'll be using today. All right, great. So yeah, we'll be getting into introductions and panelist presentations next. I want to remind folks that you can use the Q&A block that you should see to the right of the main presentation window to ask questions really at any time during today's event. We'll be making time at a couple points to take your questions, so they can be, whether they're about our panelists and their companies and offerings, or about some of the data you're going to be seeing. We really welcome any kind of questions you want. And we're going to start things off here by asking each of our panelists to introduce themselves and then also spend a few minutes, about 10 to 12 minutes, just talking about their own solutions and their own offerings. And then we'll move straight into a discussion of a range of really interesting survey results and what we think they say about the Dynamics AX landscape, everything from attitudes toward adopting cloud solutions to some of the key digital transformation trends that the AX users say they actually feel is relevant. And really what we wanted to dive into was, what is relevant and what is really just a buzzword. We want to try to really be clear and try to take those kinds of questions head on today. So without further delay, we're going to move into our introductions from our panelists. I've asked Tyler to go first in taking the floor today. So Tyler Doerner from WatServ, welcome to the event. I'm going to give you control, and I'm going to make sure the line is open here.
Jason, thanks for the opportunity to be part of everything today. So a little bit of background on WatServ and who we are and what we do. So we are part of the Brookfield organization, which is the second largest private equity firm on the planet, which makes us part of the largest conglomerate from a dynamic hosting partner perspective. We've been doing this for about 10 years. Traditionally, we've been doing private cloud deployments in WatServ infrastructure, WatServ facilities, doing AX, NAV, GP, SL, CRM, pretty much everything that's a Microsoft-based solution. Our core competency is Dynamics ERP. We don't host Oracle or SAP or, infrastructure as a service type arrangements. We believe in kind of having that vertical focus and that micro focus on hosting the Dynamics ERP products. So with that kind of background of experience, so what we're seeing right now is kind of a whole myriad. The hosting environment is extremely complicated and convoluted, to be honest. So everybody in the Microsoft channel knows about Azure, comparing what's the ROI from a solution like Azure, where does it fit, where does it not fit, private cloud deployments, and then realistically where most companies and customers are ending up is recognizing that there is no one-size-fits-all solution, and that in certain cases on-premise fits best, sometimes a private cloud solution is best, sometimes a public cloud solution is best. So, and the value, in my belief, in the future of IT is understanding and integrating all of these different cloud solutions, understanding where each one fits best in an organization, and then kind of providing that all-up guidance and that integration. The future in IT isn't in building on-premise IT systems and maintaining servers and that sort of thing. It is how to integrate all these different point-and-cloud solutions. So obviously, probably what we're going to talk most about today, given the latest news from Microsoft, is around Dynamics 365. What does it mean? Where does it sit? There's been a ton of information relayed on this topic since Worldwide Partner Conference back in July, all the way through to the user groups that were about 2 or 3 weeks ago in Tampa. So effectively this is some of the Microsoft slides, obviously, but Dynamics 365 is kind of one part of their all-up cloud strategy. They're offering 2 different editions, Enterprise Edition, which will have the operations aspect, which is Dynamics AX basically, and then they've got a small business edition, which is based on NAV, but there's a ton of market uncertainty right now as to what this is going to look like. So what I kind of want to focus on is Dynamics 365 for Operations, which is the new AX. So back in January, I believe it was, they announced that Dynamics AX was going to be available, AX 7, the new AX, forgive me if I flip between multiple nomenclatures, it's been called 5 or 6 different things in the last year. It came out as going to be a public cloud only offered by Microsoft, and then they decided to drop a little bit of a bombshell on everybody that at the user group, they've now announced that there is an on-premise solution that's going to be available. It's by no means a true on-premise solution. There is the ability to deploy, Dynamics 365 for Operations on-premise or in a private cloud, but you still rely on the Azure backend at a high-up level, and they basically are going to a distributed data model where you can basically take that centralized database out of Azure, install it in a private cloud or install it on-premise for some data residency, for data sovereignty, from a performance perspective if you've got manufacturing sites that can't be reliant on the internet and whatnot. So they've announced this hybrid cloud strategy or distributed data model strategy, and they're really, it's from what we understand from some of our meetings, is it's supposed to be out in June or July of next year. But from an existing customer perspective, from what I understand, and probably most of the people on this call, there is no data upgrade path yet to get you from AX 12 or AX 2009 up to Dynamics 365 for Operations. There is a code upgrade available, but I'm not sure, and Scott may be able to fill in some more information on this. I'm not sure when or if they've announced a data migration path for customers. I know they've also announced a license migration path, and I believe their plan is to have everybody migrated to Dynamics 365 licensing within 12 months. The one thing that I want to also highlight for people as you're looking at this Dynamics 365 for Operations is Microsoft Cloud Service Plans. This doesn't matter if it's Dynamics 365 or if it's Dynamics 365 Sales, which I believe used to be called CRM. Out of the box, you get a very restrictive, very little bit of support offered by Microsoft, and that's basically the subscription that you see way off to the far left, where companies like us and OneNeck, we've been traditionally offering that premier level support, or what we call our WatServ managed hosted services off to the right for AX customers, and knowing what they kind of want to support it. So just be aware that as you're looking at what's included from Microsoft from a support perspective and a customer service perspective, they're expecting you to pay more for a higher level of support that generally private cloud hosting companies have not done. The role that we kind of see a company like ourselves offering in, even if you wanted to go the Dynamics AX OnPrem, Dynamics AX hosted or the Dynamics AX distributed data model, there are still gaps that Microsoft is looking for either the customer or a Dynamics partner to fill. So these are kind of, again, Microsoft's content on what they're looking for a customer and what they're looking for the VAR and what level of support that they want to provide. So we've kind of put a blue box around it that there is still administration of lifecycle services and deployments, diagnostics, troubleshooting, code promotions, triage. So somebody has to do this. Like I said, either the VAR, the customer, or a company like ourselves. And again, kind of expanding on that, here's the dynamic workflow for creating a support incident or being able to move code between dev, test, pre-prod, that sort of thing. So somebody still has to be in this workflow. Microsoft is by no means getting involved in all of this. So again, just be aware when you're looking as to what's there. And I'm just going to kind of close out our vendor overview with kind of going back to what we talked about at the first. There is no one cloud, in my belief, that is right for every company. So there's a combination of public, private, on-prem, full software as a service solution. That understanding where each one kind of adds value is going to be what's key. And choose the right cloud provider. Don't just pick, Microsoft or Amazon because you're there, because the ROI changes depending on what you're looking to do. So that's it for me, Jason. I will make an effort to hand it back to you.
All right, great. I can grab control back from you. Yeah, and I'll actually just hand it straight to Scott now. Thank you very much, Tyler.
No problem.
And yeah, I would remind folks, if you do have any questions as you're listening to these introductory presentations, feel free to drop them into the Q&A. But Scott, you should now have control.
All right, thank you. Can you guys see my screen, Tyler?
We do.
Yeah, okay. So before I jump into this, I just wanted to continue what Tyler was talking about with the upgrade, the data upgrade. There is actually a story that's been released. It's not publicly available right now, but there is a company that's working on a true data migration from 2009. So if you go live now, then you can actually partner with them and they'll help you through that upgrade. It's something that's going to be GA at the time of D365 GA, but it is something that you could work with them now. If you're upgrading from 2012, what Microsoft has said is that the data structures are consistent enough that you can actually just use DIXF to do the migration. So you just do a straight export out of 2012 and import into Dynamics 365 and it works. So that's what the data upgrade is going to look like. So in front of you have what OneNeck is. We're a provider of hosted and managed services, very similar to what WatServ does. We're actually owned by TDS, which is telephone and data systems. They're into television markets and hosting and all that kind of stuff. OneNeck, as it is right now, was formed in 2014, but we've been around since 1993. So there's 5 different companies that have kind of come together to form OneNeck. And we've got 9 data centers located in the States. We focus primarily in the States. We have partnerships internationally if we need to get there. Our main focus has always really been on hosted application management. ERP kind of is driven us. So we do not just AX, but we've got Oracle and a whole bunch of other things. But AX has been a core function of our business since 3.0. We have our own cloud service that we put in place. So cloud is not new to us. We've been doing this for quite a while, similar to WatServ. And we have been partnered with Microsoft in the CSP program. So we've been involved from the get-go in making sure that hybrid story that Microsoft is really getting into now, where we're talking about some of the workflow is here, some of the workflow is over there. We've been doing that for quite a while, and through our own cloud connected to customer on-prem and that kind of thing. So when we talk about enterprise applications on Rely Cloud, this is what we offer. There's a reliability, a lot of the things that you talk about with with going to a cloud, similar to what you would have with Azure. But we offer it as kind of that, well, we don't really want to go to Azure. We don't want Microsoft controlling our stuff, so let's do it over here. But we absolutely connect with Microsoft, as we show over here when we talk about the enterprise applications on Azure. So anything that we could support within our cloud, we also support within Azure. And that's, again, more from the application side, because as a hosting company, if all we did was offer hosting, then we don't really have a story to talk about here. But our focus has always been on how do we get into that application and help you guys work with it. So monitoring it for you, making sure that it's patched, all that kind of stuff. And all of that continues when we make the transition up into a public cloud like Azure. So we look at AX. We've been doing it since 2004. We've got a couple of customers that you see on the side. We actually, ADEC, we just migrated to AX about a year ago. They were on an older system that we were hosting, and they decided to stay with us and move over to AX. Sunny Delight, we actually just moved up into Azure, so they're running 2012 in Azure now, and we helped them through that transition. We actually got their production environment up and running and available for them in less than 3 weeks, so that talks to the power of the cloud. And when you move to it, that kind of speed to market that you're talking about, a traditional production deployment when you got to go out and buy the servers and do all of that stuff, is usually months, and we did it in less than a month. So we talk about our customer management team. You know, really the way that we deal with a customer is it's not a customer, it's a relationship. So we have a number of team members that interact with customers on a regular basis to make sure that their needs, their planning, their goals are all something that we're aware of, so that we can partake in that journey together. Everything that we do is powered by ITIL, and you can see here the touch points that we have throughout the engagement. We have a dedicated account executive. We do product management, solution design architects. So when there's a question, what can we do? You know, we have that industry knowledge to be able to go in and say, well, you know, the way that you're doing things may not exactly fit with how other companies are doing it. So let's look to see what the best fit is. And here we just have the principles of our AX Outsourcing Success. So you can see right up there, the customer always comes first. Again, and the slide deck that I put together, and I actually had 2 slide decks, and so Tyler, I'm glad you went first and went through that, because I was going to talk a lot about the D365 stuff as well, but since you covered it, I felt it was kind of redundant, so I decided to go with this one. So, you know, just when you're thinking about outsourcing, like Tyler said, when you know, instead of just looking for a one cloud solution or even a one provider solution, it's really important to get in touch with a number of companies and find one that's going to match your personality to make sure that you can be successful. And it's not just about, you know, I want to put an application out in the cloud. It's that I want to be successful in doing a cloud migration. So it's really an ongoing conversation that you need to have. And this is just some of the you can see the clients that we have and how long they've been with us. Sunny Delight, like we said, we just migrated up into 2012, and ADEC has been with us for longer than AX has been around. So that just talks about us. That's the end of my presentation.
All right. Great. Well, thanks, Scott. And I can grab control back from you, I think. So, yeah, we are now going to move. I don't see any questions yet. I would just add, if anyone wants to see, you know, those slides in more detail, or you know, sort of get their own you know, for walkthrough from Scott or from Tyler or from, you know, either the WatServ or the OneNeck teams, obviously feel free to drop a note in the chat or in the Q&A. We'll make sure to hold on to anything like that to help get you connected afterwards. Okay, so I believe I have control back on the slides here. So that's the panelist presentations. Now we're going to move on to some of the findings in the data that we had to share this week. All right. So about the survey. So first of all, what we're going to be looking at here is data based on two surveys, one that was run in March, one that was run in September. Both were run by us at MSDynamicsWorld, run independently. Together, they comprise 700 different participants across the two surveys. The March one was really cloud focused, and the September survey was focused on digital transformation themes and viewpoints. And with regard to, I think, some of the goals of the cloud one, we wanted to understand basic capabilities, competencies, skills, organizational maturity. We also wanted to get a first read on, in the digital transformation survey, sort of whether, as I mentioned before, is it just hype or is it a concept that really does help to explain, I guess, from the perspective of users, from the perspective of AX professionals, what's really going on when it comes to planning IT investment, the future of how they're going to run their businesses, how they're going to control their processes. And what we found is when we looked at some of the cloud-specific data and the digital transformation trends, that the sentiment really does align pretty well, and there's some interesting overlap, and we'll be getting into that as we move ahead here. And so I know I talked about this a little bit, but some of the key questions we're trying to ask when it comes to digital transformation, because this is some of our newest data that we're going to be sharing today. We're trying to think about things, and we'll get into this with our panelists too. But what's the future of software investment? What's the future of IT planning? What are some of the technology trends that are actually driving corporate decisions, or how are they impacting how leaders are thinking about the future of their businesses? And then, how can we tie these trends into sort of practical decisions that are being made, at the level of the companies buying them, but also if we kind of make the assumption that Microsoft is a key component, Microsoft technology and solutions and service providers who sell Microsoft technology are a key component of what people on this call really care about. How does Microsoft's own direction play into some of the decisions that organizations are facing? And I think, Scott and Tyler just did a great job of really putting a point on that in terms of thinking about, we know that people on this call are AX users or professionals, and you're really thinking about, how some of those next steps are going to be driven by Microsoft's own technology and choices. Okay, just a little more background on who was in these two surveys. So the cloud survey, as I mentioned, was from March. AX had very good representation in that. About 40% of participants said they work with AX. And the split between the types of people who participated, it was about 50-50 between users and professionals. And for just have a little trouble switching the slides here. The September survey was really focused on digital transformation. Again, good representation, even a little bit higher percentage for AX participants there. The breakdown was a little different in this one, so about a third of participants were users, and then the rest were professionals in the sort of Dynamics or Microsoft ecosystem. And I wanted to just sort of set things up with this one piece of data before we really get into the discussion, because one of the first things people have been asking when we've been talking about these results in a couple different places so far was, what do people really think digital transformation is? Is it even worth talking about? And so that was really our first question too. We don't really want to just chase buzzwords or chase sort of hot trends that don't have a lot of meat behind them. So we really asked, is it an influential? Is it influencing your organizations today? Does your leadership take it seriously? And the results were pretty clear here. I mean, 40% of AX users said yes, and then another 37%. So nearly three-quarters said it either is an influence or it's probably an influence, and then the other quarter or so are saying probably not or not. So fairly good percentage of people taking the survey really felt there was something to that. So I wanted to really start breaking that down in terms of where does digital transformation really matter. And here's what AX users told us. The top theme that they saw it impacting was reporting and analytics. And then it goes down a very good list of all very worthy areas in my view. And I want to tie that back to cloud because that's where we're here. So, cloud's not all about transformation, but companies do choose to invest in a greater use of cloud-based technology. We know that. We'll be looking at more slides on some of those data points. So I want to put this to our panelists. If you look at this list of top ways AX users are finding ways that digital transformation is relevant, can you pick one or maybe two that stand out as they relate to how you serve AX customers? And Tyler, I can put this one to you first. Would you pick one or two that really stand out?
Sure. I mean, I think some of the key things are probably number one there is we have reporting and compliance. I think what Microsoft is doing with Power BI and especially with Dynamics 365 on Azure and whatnot, their ability to infinitely scale infrastructure and whatnot in the background to run high-powered queries in Power BI and all that sort of stuff. It's just technology and performance that customers would just be a very hard pressed and it would be extremely cost prohibitive to go down that route to build an entire BI platform in and of itself. So, when we met with some of the Microsoft executives, there are cases where somebody hits to run a Power BI query, and it's automatically going out and running that query across 400 or 500 different servers in the background for 3 or 4 seconds each. Customers and quite frankly, even private cloud hosting companies like us, we just don't have that ability and that technology. So that's the way that businesses are getting the value out of the BI solution without really having to make any of that big, massive investment into those types of platforms. I think another key one is you could kind of lump 3 and 4 together with, again, Microsoft, what they've been doing with Office 365, with what they've been doing, the fact that it's all in an all-up suite. You're getting, your Exchange, your SharePoint, your OneDrive, all of the suite of products from a collaboration, your Skype for Business. So, they're driving user adoption and business process standardization through the same way in the same set of tools. So I think those would be a couple of the very easy ones where it's kind of understanding what digital transformation means from an end user perspective.
Okay, great. And Scott, any that you would note here?
Yeah, I think integration to other systems is one of the ones that we see a lot of customers asking about. Because as we move into this hybrid world, when we start talking about workloads that are still running on-premise, things that we've moved to the cloud, we've got EDI transactions, people are looking at IoT and machine learning. There's a lot of different components now that companies are trying to integrate so that they can get to that reporting and analytics, which is why that's first, right? That's what they want to drive their business. But in order to get all of that together, you got to start looking at all of these disparate systems that they've put in place over the years that they're not necessarily ready to abandon because they've invested a lot of time and money into getting them working for their business. And so getting that data out and into that, a common location where we can start putting it all together, that's really driving a lot of the questions that we're seeing right now.
Okay, great. And one other question on this slide that came to me was, as it relates to add-on solutions and the impact that they have when it comes to planning for AX itself running in the cloud. Is that a major consideration when you talk to AX users or AX customers who are either already in the cloud or sort of trying to plan a change from on-premise to not on-premise and some sort of off-premise solution? And Scott, I want to let you follow up on this one, and then I'll get back to Tyler on it.
Yeah, it's definitely a consideration. A lot of the ISVs, are not necessarily playing catch-up, but they may not be ready with a solution in the cloud when you are. And so making sure that you've got those add-on solutions available and that they're actually going to work the way that you expect them to. We talk about the integration in that, and even when you start opening up now in the cloud, which is widely available, security becomes a concern. And so you want to make sure that when you look at that add-on, it's going to do what you want it to do, and it's also not going to expose you to things that you don't want to have happen. So that making sure that the ISVs are there when you need them and how you need them is definitely, I think, an important consideration.
All right. Tyler, anything else you'd add there as it relates to add-ons?
No, I think the easiest way for customers to do that, and partners, frankly, for that matter, is what Microsoft has done with AppSource, right? They're vetting ISVs, they're vetting technologies from a single sign-on and a functionality perspective that, customers and partners can go onto AppSource, search for time and expense functionality, for example, and it's supposed to be able to bring up, whatever ISV solution provide time and expense functionality for AX. So they're trying to make it very, very easy for people to be able to find those add-on solutions. And I think that's their future vision, is that all of those solutions, all those ISVs and add-ons will be available through AppSource.
Okay, interesting. And certainly a cloud, very sort of cloud-native approach there in terms of how those apps will be connected to other systems and authentication. I know some of the requirements there. So I wanted to move on to some more data. What types of cloud services are people using right now? And so we asked not just where you're hosting ERP or something like that, but sort of what clouds are you a customer of at this point in your organization's sort of digital transformation or cloud evolution, whatever you want to call it here. And I think it's interesting. AX customers are using cloud for a range of business needs, but it's not just one. It's not just one cloud provider. A small number really did dominate here. I mean, obviously Microsoft was the most popular, and private cloud was second. Amazon and Google are in use, and then there's a sort of a fairly good block, almost 25%. There's some other sort of maybe lesser known sort of public cloud providers out there, which I think is an interesting element to this. So, question for the panel here. When you're looking at an existing customer's cloud landscape or cloud portfolio, or where they already have solutions, I guess is what I'm trying to ask, are there challenges to sort of even just discovering where a company is already tied into some sort of cloud investments? Is it a challenge to sort of discover, do they have blind spots perhaps? And I think, Tyler, maybe I'll start with you this time, but is that a challenge to sort of unravel that kind of sort of landscape within a particular company?
Well, I think the blend, when you say cloud services, is a little tough to delineate. You put solutions out there like NetSuite or Salesforce or other true software as a service type solutions, and the customers that have gone that route very consciously and would necessarily think of it as a cloud service, right? A cloud service, I think, is more, kind of generally indicative of, Exchange Online or SharePoint Online, where they know that there's a conscious effort to move a workload from on-premise into a hosted type environment, where there are solutions out there that are cloud-born, that's the only way to go. I don't think customers are necessarily viewing those as cloud solution or cloud services per se. As for which ones it's tough to say that which ones they're using. I think it is a little bit challenging to understand. I mean, I think the easiest example of ones is, Office 365, right? That's one that, most enterprises are doing. I mean, we used to have a whole pile of hosted Exchange customers with us, and there's just quite frankly no point at the price point and the service that Microsoft can offer. We're moving most of our customers up to our managed service for Office 365 because it's a great solution. It is what it is, and it's at a price point that's just so frankly attractive.
Okay, great. Scott, anything you would add there in terms of blind spots in where customers are today with their cloud investments or maybe their cloud architectures?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we've seen is, that when we talk about cloud, one of the things that it promises is to kind of remove that shadow IT where you've got people that are doing things that the IT department doesn't really know. But early adopters to the cloud, when they get in there, the cloud is deceptively easy to get into, right? So I can go out and start my own subscription to Azure and test things out. And then before you know it, you've got these business critical applications that are up in Azure that you never really made that conscious decision the way that Tyler was talking about, because it was more of a science experiment. Will this work? Oh, yeah, it works. Okay, let's keep it. And then you go in and you talk to a company, and they're like, yeah, we got 3 or 4 things that are in Azure. And then you sit down with the IT department, you talk to other people, and it ends up they got 30 or 40, and nobody really has any visibility of that. So, putting governance around that is really important. And I think that blind spot is exactly that, is that the beauty of the cloud is that it's open to everybody. And that's kind of what you really need to think about when you're trying to discover what a company is actually using.
Mm-hmm. This next chart, I think, maybe still keeps with this theme a little bit. We asked what are the top areas where AX customers plan to add cloud services. Actually, I want to also just touch on a question that came in because I think it's important for sort of the rest of the conversation, asking whether this study was done in the U.S. only. And the answer to that is no. It was done. It was opened up worldwide. I don't have the exact data, but I believe North America was a little more than 50% of the responses. We'll have more of a breakdown on that in a written report we're working on that goes into more of some of the data transformation findings and results, and we'll be sharing that at another time. But yeah, it was not U.S. only. It was international. So in terms of top areas, the thing that I was a little surprised when respondents told us that the top of the list would be reporting and not maybe CRM, for example. But if you think back 2 slides, that was also the top of the list for digital transformation in terms of where people see it impacting their businesses. And Scott, let me put this one to you first. So I know we've already touched on sort of the importance of Power BI and perhaps other Cortana intelligence suite reporting services that Microsoft is offering. But is it just? Do you think if companies are interested in cloud for reporting, that it's really just Power BI talking, or if there's sort of a larger move on BI and reporting solution providers that are really trying to step up and work with companies that want to move more of their data, or at least the analysis of that data, into the cloud?
Yeah, I think we saw this kind of even before the Power BI and Cortana came around. There was this move to accessibility. Everybody's got a mobile device. They can't necessarily carry around their laptop all the time, but they want to be able to see reports and stuff as they're on the go. And so the cloud kind of offers that solution almost natively, where you don't have to worry about having VPNs and firewalls and all that kind of stuff and your local your local data center in order to provide this reporting to people. And you're not just sending out Excel spreadsheets that they've got to open. There's actually a native tool that you can download and install on your smartphone that you open up the reporting and you see it the way that it was designed. So I think that this transition to having reporting kind of driving this cloud adoption, I've seen for a number of years now, simply because of the availability. Everybody wants it when they want it, where they want it, and reporting is the easiest thing to deliver that way.
All right, great. Tyler, what are your thoughts? Reporting remains a priority when you have conversations with AX users?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where we're seeing more and more of the focus when customers are looking at ERP now. They're not starting evaluating what's the GL functionality or what types of inventory costing are available, to really focus on the data that they can get out of their investments of these systems. Most of the systems are mature from a interoperability perspective, but what sort of insight can you gain from your investment in an AX that's going to help you run the business better, drive value better, and that ultimately is stemmed from the type of reporting that can come out of it. Previously some of these, big monolithic Hyperions or something like this from a reporting perspective were as big a challenge as the ERP implementation themselves. And they were at a point where customers were having a hard time justifying the investment in both the software and the infrastructure to run it, where you look at what Microsoft's done now with Power BI, they've lumped it in with Dynamics 365. It's all hosted by Microsoft. You're really into a data and a report writing exercise, and I think it's kind of the most natural jumping off point, because it's what most customers have always wanted to be able to do, just traditionally have not been able to afford to make that investment.
All right, so another sort of cloud data point here that I wanted to touch on, how do AX users expect their cloud solution investments to change? I should note, this was, I guess 7 to 8 months ago now, and a lot has changed in terms of Microsoft's guidance on where they are going with Dynamics AX, a lot more of a focus on AX running in Azure with, I think it's maybe best way to describe it, as I understand it today, is some on-premise hybrid options, but no pure on-premise options for the future. And obviously, that's something that I think bears watching by everybody to see if and how that the details of that evolve over time. But I would have to guess next time we ask this question that more than 52% even will say that they see their cloud solution usage increasing in the year coming up. And has that changed for you? I'd like to get both of your input on this. So what are AX users, and I know you both touched on this in your introductions, but what are some of the questions AX users are asking right now about the future of the product and the future of working in the cloud? And Tyler, can you maybe take this one first?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to talk to the 4.3% at the top, first of all, to understand who thinks that investments in cloud are going to decrease. I don't think that's I fundamentally don't see that happening, no matter whether it's an AX solution or not, for that matter. No, I think customers right now are just, Microsoft has changed the landscape so much in just rebranding things. The fact that CRM, quote unquote, doesn't exist anymore. It's now Dynamics 365 for sales or Dynamics 365 for service. Customers right now are just confused in a nomenclature, in a security perspective, where do all these different pieces come together. I've made investments in SharePoint already or Office 365. How does that tie together? How does it all come together? So there's just a ton of questions as to how all of this stuff is going to come together to piece together a all-up, full-blown business solution, not just an ERP solution. Microsoft has changed licensing models and, again, names of products, and understanding how to leverage all these different, what were traditionally silos that now Microsoft is trying to make it look like as an integrated solution is really what's driving a lot of market confusion and a lot of questions.
All right. Scott, anything you would add? I know you're likewise having probably quite a few conversations with AX customers who are trying to plan these things out.
Yeah, absolutely. Up until the announcements, that recently happened, a lot of customers were in that hurry up and wait stage because they're reaching the end of their 2009, we want to do an upgrade, but we're not sure where we want to go. Should we go to 2012? Should we wait and see what AX7, now Dynamics 365 is? And like Tyler said, the announcements haven't really helped a lot of that. But the customers are at the point now where they're saying, well, we can't really wait anymore. We've been waiting forever, so now we need to make a decision. And so what we're starting to see is kind of this mass of customers that are coming up saying, well, what are my options really? If I don't want to go to Dynamics 365 because I'm really not sure what that means, can I stay with 2009 but move it to the cloud? Because, you know, the cloud model has really taken hold. There's a lot of companies that are saying, you know, we manufacture car parts. We don't need a data center. There's other companies that are doing that for us. Let them do the data center, and we'll just worry about our car parts. And so you're getting into this conversation now where it's not just about, yeah, the new shiny is here, let's go to that. It's, well, I'm not really sure about that, but I still want to take advantage of this this thing they call the cloud. So there's a lot of conversations that are happening with customers around, you know, can we really support their existing applications and just moving it to the cloud, whether that's our cloud or Azure cloud or whatever. So I think that's what's driving, you know, that a lot of the questions that we're seeing are based on that.
All right, great. I'm going to jump just a bit through some of the findings here. I wanted to touch on one that really gets into technical challenges. We asked in this most recent survey, what are the technical challenges that most concern you about this concept of digital transformation? And you know, some of these responses made me think immediately of concerns that probably also go with planning a cloud strategy or planning a cloud architecture. If you're an AX solution owner, looking at that balance, I would say between complexity, collaboration, or ability to enable collaboration, replacing legacy systems, of course, and kind of avoiding software proliferation, avoiding a footprint that's unmanageable. And as cloud service providers, I wanted to ask each of you how you're seeing that your customers are trying to make sense of those varying concerns. Again, I mean, with a list like this, I would maybe ask you to pick one or two that you think really are things that your clients are trying to address head on when it comes to planning the future of their solutions that involve AX. And I should forget who I asked. But I had to go first last time, but Tyler, why don't I throw this one to you first? Is there anything that you would pick here that you think really stands out?
Well, honestly, I mean, if I look at it holistically, 1 through 5 are kind of all handled. I wouldn't put them as 1 through 5. They're kind of all part and parcel of the same problem. So when you're designing a new solution, you're probably replacing a legacy system, which means you're expanding a software footprint, which falls into strategic planning. Like, I think all 5 of these things are being handled when you're talking about the concept of digital transformation. And as Microsoft is doing, I mean, they're coming across with an all-up platform to kind of go across all different parts of the organization, from collaboration to networking with Yammer, and now that they've bought LinkedIn, and it really is kind of going across a whole different piece. And all 5 of these topics are kind of covered off as customers are looking to what are they going to do next. And they're investing in platforms like the Microsoft one, where it goes across everything from your financial reporting to your social intercompany social media feed to your Skype for Business to, and it is complex. It is not easy to figure this out, as much as anybody who's ever talked to a sales rep from Microsoft will tell you that, oh yeah, it all works. Sure it does. It takes a lot to get there, and it is complicated, and it is daunting. But these are the 5 things that almost every customer is thinking about as they're expanding and kind of reinvesting in their technology footprint.
Yeah, it's interesting. I should mention also, in terms of the way that these choices were presented, these were 5 of, I think, about 12, and so I picked the first 5 here to show, just because it really did. It sort of dropped off measurably after these 5 were sort of as top priorities. And I do agree with you, Tyler. They really do kind of make an interesting sort of collection of things that go hand in hand. Scott, anything you would add in terms of maybe a point or two that really stand out to you?
Yeah, well, similar to what Tyler said, that this whole digital transformation is very daunting. And when you take a look at the success of Azure, when Azure first came out, it was all software as a service. Because, do website as a service, do database as a service, and the infrastructure as a service wasn't really there. And the adoption rate was really low because companies weren't ready to just redo their entire workload. Right, there's you got to keep the lights on, you got to work with bugs, and there's all of this other stuff that takes time away from that. Let's go reinvent everything. And then when infrastructure as a service came out, a lot of companies said, well, wait, we can take our existing stuff and move it. Let's do that, right? And that's where a lot of companies are starting. Is they're not looking at what do I need to do to rewrite this entire thing so that it can take advantage of all of these new services. Let's get it working somewhere where we know it's going to be stable and reliable, and then we'll talk about, now we'll take advantage of the new services that are available. So I think that transition phase is happening right now, and what we're going to see in a couple of years from now is a lot more of the adoption of the software as a service type stuff, the platform as a service, because the companies are going to be working towards that as they start changing their development patterns. So it's not something that can happen overnight. So it's not surprising that these are the top 5, because that's if you're talking about the life cycle of your software, and you can't just overnight change it to match a new technology.
Great. I wanted to jump to a bit of a separate topic, but I know there's quite a few AX professionals on the line here, so I thought this would be an interesting one for both users and professionals. So we've asked the users, and we've done this a few times in the past, to rate their partner relationships. And I think, again, as it comes to advice that users are getting about the cloud, I think it can be a complicated area to navigate. You probably can get different viewpoints depending on who you talk to, even within one company, or if you're talking to a OneNeck or a WatServ versus a sort of core AX implementation provider. You might even get different responses there too. Part of the relationships, I guess I would say they're holding steady. Poor relationship ratings don't appear to be rising, but the level of excellent dipped into, at least in our measurement, slightly, where satisfactory actually rose to maybe perhaps make up some of that difference. It's always an interesting area just to check in with cloud service providers and hosting service providers to see how they're seeing those relationships that are being managed between users, yourselves, and some of the AX solution providers that you, I'm sure, work with on a regular basis. So Scott, maybe I'd put this one to you first. How are AX users doing, you think, when it comes to navigating the various relationships that they have going on that require them to sort of pay attention to the health of their AX solutions?
I agree with what we see here. There's been, and I think I don't necessarily blame the partners. I think, like Tyler mentioned earlier, the Microsoft roadmap has changed so frequently, it's hard for the partners to keep up with, and that frustrates the customers, because the customers are going to the partner expecting them to be, the experts. And it's hard to be an expert on something that was announced yesterday that's a complete shift from what you've been working the past 6 months to get familiar with. So I can definitely see that this is happening, and there's a lot of customers that we are talking to as well that are, my partner doesn't know what's going on. And Microsoft doesn't know what's going on, so it's hard for the partner to know. So I can definitely see that, where you'd see that dip. I think as Microsoft solidifies their message, the partners are going to be able to kind of play that catch-up game and start getting back into that position where they can offer that confidence.
Tyler, anything you'd add?
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add is I think there's been a massive amount of consolidation that's happened in the VAR channel, from smaller VARs getting swallowed up by bigger VARs, getting swallowed up by bigger VARs, that customers now may not necessarily, they may be a customer of a partner who they didn't necessarily have the intent of partnering with, and we're seeing that more and more, and that's just a all up market trend. So I think that could probably lead to some of the satisfactory to poor type commentary, just due to some market forces that are occurring.
Yeah, as we come up to the top of the hour here, I want to just remind the folks in the audience that this would probably be a great time to put in any last-minute questions you have, whether it's about some of the study data or whether it's questions about cloud hosting for WatServ and OneNeck, anything else you have left there. Also, I want to note we do want to seek your feedback after today's event. You should see a very quick survey pop up after we depart. That will give us and our speakers some good input on what you liked about today's event, what you'd like to see us do differently in the future. I want to cover one more slide if we have time for it here before we hit the top of the hour. So, from the user perspective, do your organizations have the skills they need for the future plans running as a digital business? If you take this idea of digital transformation through to its logical conclusion, that companies are moving in that direction, that they plan to leave some of the more manual or paper-based processes and functions behind in the future. And do either of you have any recommendations on how companies should be developing the right skill sets so that, let's say, to make it, I guess, specific to your own businesses, when they come to you and companies are working with you as a service provider, so that they can be successful working in a more cloud-focused environment? Tyler, any thoughts on that one?
No, I think this goes to what I was saying earlier in that, the role of traditional IT of, running network cables and, building servers and installing servers, that role is very, very quickly evaporating, which is, I think, where the partially is coming from. You have a lot of people who have worked in the industry for a long, long time that have a very core set of technical skills, but those technical skills, the need for those are very quickly evaporating with what's happening from a technology and a cloud perspective. So they kind of understand what's there, but where the future really is heading is it's integrating cloud solutions to deliver all-up business value, not providing an on-premise point solution anymore. So the partially, I think, is, people are recognizing that, and they're trying to gain that skill set and that ability. They're just not there yet.
Yeah, perhaps a more strategic role for IT and like less laying cable. Scott, anything you'd add?
No, I agree with what Tyler's saying. The software-defined network, I think, is kind of the harbinger of the software-defined everything, where we're going to get away from this physical world that we're going to be dealing with, and the whole skill set is going to be that knowledge is still going to need to be there, but it's not going to be that same application. We're going to need to be able to log in somewhere and configure something to work the way that we need it to, as opposed to cobbling something together.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up there. We could make a last call for questions. I don't see any others in the queue right now. Let me just put Scott and Tyler's contact information up, or if you want if you want any further information about what you saw today, just put a note into the chat as well, and we can obviously help make a connection there or provide any of the information that you saw today. Well, Scott Morley from OneNeck, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And and Tyler Doerner from WatServ, thank you very much for taking the time. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for the invite.
All right, with that, we're going to wrap up today's event. We did record it. We'll be making that available soon as well. And that concludes the event. Have a great day, everybody.